Picture this. You just finished playing a video game for the first time, but this game became more than just a video game to you, captivating your soul as you're now inspired to solve its mysteries in ways you hadn't before through multiple repeat playthroughs. For many of you, I imagine games like Dark Souls, Hollow Knight, or Expedition 33 come to mind when I mention this concept, as they are games with basic features and lore that are nearly impossible to fully discover without looking things up, causing you to wonder, what if I tried things this way instead? In a way, it's a lot like reinventing that game entirely, which is the exact same concept behind what it takes to create a good speedrun route. Take, for example, Pokemon games. A normal playthrough usually has you building up a team of 6, picking up and hoarding as many items as you can, then using your entire team's strengths and weaknesses to solve the game's battles. But for a speedrun, strategies are formed around the bare minimum requirements, which usually make a team look exactly like how we played Pokemon as a kid. Our bag of items look like a zombie apocalypse survival kit, and the paths to our destination look like a maze made for kids on the back of a cereal box with a very direct path to its final destination. However, everything I just explained was but a simple skeleton of where those solutions bring us to. What our cereal box doesn't tell you is the story of how speedrunners were eventually able to stack up enough solutions until they could somehow beat the oldest Pokemon game in almost the same amount of time it takes to watch the entire Minecraft movie. So what exactly is that story then? Well, back in the year 2008, the final chapter of Pokemon Red and Blue speedruns led directly to Squirtle as our main protagonist, as it was capable of beating the game faster than any other Pokemon. Particularly, the requirement for HM such as Surf could also be used as a powerful move in the late sections of Kanto. And when combined with Squirtle's power, defense, move coverage, and ability to obliterate Brock faster than any other Pokemon available at the time, then you have a Pokemon that can maintain its massive lead from the beginning to the end of the game, resulting in times under 2 hours.
155. Awesome.
However, this reign from Squirtle was not meant to be Pokemon Red and Blue's final chapter, as another Pokemon was about to take over after about 5 years of domination from the turtle. If you've played Pokemon for as long as I have, then it's likely no secret that Pokemon Red and Blue are games held together by duct tape and a dream. And as it turns out, thanks to those many intricate and likely unintended features of Pokemon Red, Nidoking fit the route even better than Squirtle. Part of this advantage came from its crazier move coverage, access to a final stage evolution sooner than Squirtle, and the ridiculously broken X accuracy combined with Horn Drill to one-shot a ton of threats that Squirtle couldn't, revolutionizing what it meant to beat Pokemon Red and Blue as fast as possible for decades to come.
This was a really fun game to speedrun because there's a lot of strategy involved. There are a lot of fights in this game that can kill you if you get bad luck. For the most part, during this run, you don't buy more than what you need. I'll walk in about 80 grass tiles in Viridian Forest, and only a third of them can generate encounters. You get a boost to your stats from certain gym leaders after you beat them. That boost is reapplied every time one of my other stats is modified. This idea of saving time in Red Bar saves about 3 seconds to skip a level up jingle or a move learning jingle. Best case scenario is a 9 encounter Mount Moon.
Please, Mount Moon. Please be nice now. Ah, this encounter rate. I'm pretty sure this is like 12 encounters. This is stupid. This is stupid.
What you just saw was actually part of a former world record by a runner named Extra Tricky. And I imagine you'd think that with such an unreasonable amount of wild encounters that the chances of getting a world record would be impossible. But the thing is that unlike the remakes Fire Red, Leaf Green, the luxury of being able to buy a rappel in Pewter City wasn't an option in Pokemon Red and Blue, making the long walk through Mount Moon an absolute nightmare. As for these clips on screen, an unexpected death or missed KO can be devastating in a speedrun, especially when it's the result of you having bad stats on a Pokemon. But what could possibly fix both of these things decided by pure chance? Well, simple. Just avoid chance entirely. We typically call this trick RNG manipulation in the world of speedrunning, which essentially is just the player taking advantage of the fact that when you reset, enter the game at the exact same time, and do some of the exact same actions, then you'll get the same exact results. And I know people usually start to lose interest when you bring up RNG manipulation because they think that this technique causes there to be way too much streamlined into our favor for a speedrun. While that might be true to a degree, this actually isn't even close to the case at all, as the precision required to weave the entire game's RNG from beginning to end is an impossible thing to achieve for a human. A run done by a human would need to selectively choose the most valuable spots to manipulate in our favor. And so, over the course of a couple years, a beautiful balance was struck by leaving the biggest appeal of the Pokemon series completely up to the player and their decision making, that being the game's battles.
The Pidgeot has Sky Attack, Wing Attack, Mirror Move, and Whirlwind. The latter two moves do nothing. The first two can end the run. Sky Attack takes a turn to charge, but I need 2 turns to set up, so if he Sky Attacks turn 1, I'm in pretty big trouble. If he Wing Attacks, then I just need him to not Wing Attack turn 2. And now I just need no Wing Attack as I X-Ack, and I get it. And I've got the world record. That's the formula. You come up with a lot of backup strats for bad Nidorans and bad times, but a good run is almost always going to look like this with just a lot of luck. But it does feel nice when a lot of the strats you used contributed to your time.
But what if you did have the power to weave the entire world of Pokemon's RNG in your favor until everything was perfect? Well, you'd have to tailor every possible input frame by frame until you defined perfection. And to define perfection in a Pokemon speedrun is literally impossible no matter how hard we chase it in Pokemon. Because unlike games like Mario 64, where a perfect speedrun is defined by inhuman speed and precision, a perfect Pokemon speedrun is defined by inhuman strategies and results. For example, imagine if speedrunners could just skip the need to use X accuracies every time they clicked Horn Drill on Nidoking. And with that kind of power, what if they could even skip the need for every power boosting item to just crit or have the opponent keep you perfectly in red HP the entire game? Sounds pretty crazy, right? But it was this type of thinking that formed an entirely separate section of speedrunning known as tool-assisted speedruns. A tool-assisted speedrun is not meant to surpass or even be compared to human, but instead are meant to be a showcase of how different a speedrun would look if you could control the fate of every single action, making a speedrun perfect. So with perfection in mind, I imagine the idea of expanding past the human capabilities using Nidoking in Pokemon Red sounds pretty appealing. But do you remember how I mentioned how you have to rethink these solutions going from a casual solution to a speedrun solution? Well, the same thing happens here too, because we have to think about how pressing a button 1 hour ago could have a butterfly effect later on. Because in a tool-assisted speedrun, certain critical hits, catches, and misses don't exist without that single A press that happened an hour ago. So while some of the original tool-assisted speedruns look similar to human solutions, the path you had to take to grab Nidoking, then level it up, eventually proved to be slower than just outright using Squirtle. Where it got even weirder was when Clefairy and Tauros were introduced as answers that somehow became faster. Much of the idea behind why these two Pokemon were even theorized to be faster in the first place was based on the advantages Tauros has in a task, as the combined ability to learn both Fissure and Horn Drill on a Pokemon with an incredibly high base speed stat was too hard to ignore testing. Because with a higher base speed stat, your critical hit chance is increased in Generation 1, meaning that a tool-assisted speedrun using Tauros could breeze through fights much faster than Nidoking with how much more often it could crit. Clefable, on the other hand, was mostly thrown into the mix for its ability to Mega Punch with more power from its normal same type attack bonus, combined with having a fairly similar coverage as Nidoking. But the biggest benefit to both these Pokemon was how easily they could be obtained while taking the straightest path forward towards each gym. Though eventually, Clefable's usefulness would be replaced entirely by just Squirtle, as it proved to be just fast enough to get to the Safari Zone before claiming the new king of red-blue speedruns, Tauros, about 30 minutes faster than a human is capable of. Now, with all this crazy Tauros stuff being used in a perfect tool-assisted speedrun, I imagine you're wondering if we could use that as a human and throw away Nidoking the same way. And unfortunately, Tauros has been deemed to be a bit too inconsistent for humans to take advantage of all the things that Nidoking is capable of, with strategies like Silphco Red Bar, where the trainer AI from our rivals Gyarados is used to force a Hydro Pump in order to save a ridiculous amount of time from skipping sound effects thanks to Nidoking's weaknesses. It's also a fact that Tauros is a bit underleveled compared to Nidoking at this point in an actual speedrun, which ends up adding to that inconsistency even more when you can't crit everything like a Tass. However, I don't think we should ever fully shut down ideas until we've fully tested them out all the way through. Because as far as I know, the idea of using Tauros in a human speedrun has only theoretically been said that it's not worth it. And I know these things take a lot of time to explore and see all the way through, but theorizing can only get you so far. Because if we hadn't done things like testing different ideas over the years, we wouldn't have figured out half as much as we have in the world of Pokemon speedrunning, where ideas like Lillipup's potential as a speedrun Pokemon was ignored for years until a speedrunner tried it out for fun. And when they did, they accidentally found a subtle but effective 1 minute of time save thanks to the wait animation that plays each time you send it out into battle. Or how a casual player came into my chat as I was playing Pokemon Ultra Moon and suggested that we use Zorua with Toxic to get past one of the hardest bosses ever created in a Pokemon game, revolutionizing the speedrun forever through purely creative thinking. But here's the thing. While the stories of how these ideas ended up being faster is interesting, it doesn't paint a full picture of that creativity. And while I focused really hard on Pokemon Red and Blue so far, I personally wasn't a part of inventing those speedruns. And unfortunately, much of the brainstorming behind those ideas have been lost to time. So while I can't share that creative process, what I can do is share the creative process behind what I think a brand new Pokemon game is going to look like as a speedrun. So what if we maybe invented a Pokemon Legends EA speedrun right before the game officially releases? Really quickly, if you're enjoying the video enough, you should consider subscribing to the channel so you guys can check out some of my coverage on the Legends ZA speedrun when it's officially released. If you want a little more, I'm gonna have plenty of ZA content over at patreon.com/PulseEffects for all of my subscribers there too. Pokemon Legends ZA speedruns are going to be revolutionary in the world of Pokemon speedrunning. To start, the way we take on a Pokemon game is going to have to be fleshed out from scratch because of its real-time battle system, as we now have to think about things like how fast can we fire off a move animation, which Pokemon has the best, fastest, and most effective moves for the system, and just how much are we going to need to rely on Mega Evolutions. And to add yet another layer, all these ideas need to complement clearing the game's story as fast as possible with the smallest amount of investment we can find. So with all that said, here are some of the ideas that I think will end up being in a Pokemon Legends EA speedrun. I'm really hoping that the dialogue options for this game are allowed to be picked before we fire up the game, because the moment we arrive in Lumio City, I imagine there's going to be a ton of dialogue that gets us closer to picking a starter, which will then be followed up with a battle against our rival. That rival has so far been confirmed to pick the starter Pokemon that you have the biggest advantage over, which absolutely complicates who I think the fastest starter Pokemon is going to be. I'll say now that our choice of starter Pokemon likely won't be centered around Chikorita, since Chikorita is more of a tanky Pokemon, which doesn't really lend very well at all to speedrunning. Overall, that role looks to be best filled by Tepig with its very offensive fire-fighting type combination. Despite that being a really appealing thing coming from Tepig, I actually think that speedruns will be done with Totodile. My reasoning for this choice is two things. Totodile not only has access to some crazy coverage, but it also gets access to some really good setup TMs such as Swords Dance and Dragon Dance to sweep its opponents really fast. But even if those TMs end up not being readily available, the potential of priority moves like Aqua Jet scream out to me as a fast way to quickly get damage onto an opponent. And the faster we fire off moves, the faster we can take down opponents in battle. However, I am a bit inclined to believe that much like Legends Arceus, which uses the starter for a short period of time before eventually abandoning it for a stronger Pokemon, is likely going to be the play for ZA as well. It all really just depends on when we can get our hands on some of those really strong Pokemon, if they'll actually obey us in the first place, and just how much we need to invest into them just to get them off the ground for battle. And given all the footage that we've had shared with us so far, the biggest hint I saw that this will be the case is from the public demo I played at the Pokemon World Championships. During that demo, I ended up playing an actual story mission where Zygarde showed me what I assume is going to be the very first Rogue Mega Evolution raid battle against an Absol, and once you complete that story mission, you get to keep it for free. And that winged monstrosity was leveled up so high in comparison to our entire party that I have no doubt that it's going to be used in battles for quite a while, assuming that Legends EA doesn't have us dealing with obedience once we grab this thing. I do however think that Absol will also have limited usage based on how many Rogue Mega Evolution raid battles are fully required throughout the story. Because if the story makes it so that we have to do these raids, then depending on which ones are required to clear as well as the level that we get them at, it's probably going to determine whether they have good potential for a speedrun. However, I can already tell you that those Mega Evolution raid battles take a lot of time to complete. And theoretically, I think there's better ways to obtain a lot of these Pokemon outside of those raid battles. The Wild Zones in particular seem to have the biggest potential for powerful Pokemon that can be caught quickly with this new knockout animation, the inclusion of fully evolved alpha Pokemon, and the fact that red rocks on the ground can be farmed for Mega Stones. If I can just find a wild Absol, farm some rocks for its Mega Stone, then level it up while naturally progressing the story, then I'm probably gonna end up doing that instead. What makes this investment even better is how having an entire party doesn't waste time like it does in older Pokemon games that force you to watch evolutions and learn new moves the exact moment you reach that level that you could evolve or learn moves at. Instead, it's a lot like Legends Arceus, where you have to go into a menu and manually do it, which absolutely adds a ton of value to finding more than just one Pokemon to solve the game's battles. However, another question that adds a lot of layers to all this is exactly how valuable Mega Evolution is going to be in a speedrun. Well, thanks to the latest gameplay footage we got from the demo that took place in Paris, France, we now know that Mega Evolution raid battles don't require you to be able to Mega Evolve to take part in or clear those raid battles. Instead, we can just use the Mega Evolution energy to power up moves, which is going to add a lot of work for speedrunners, because we have to measure how much damage you can do with a fully Mega Evolved Pokemon and how long it takes for that Mega Evolution animation to fully play out against the potential of wild Pokemon and these powered up moves. Personally, I think the most interesting case will come from Pokemon like Hawlucha. Hawlucha in particular is what I consider to be one of the many gods of Pokemon speedrunning, as it's been used across multiple Pokemon games with enough success that it never needed to Mega Evolve or even hold an item to be successful, when it could instead use moves like Acrobatics, which double in power when you're not holding an item. But now that it has a Mega Evolution, it now has the option to potentially Mega Evolve to speed up certain battles where Acrobatics isn't as useful, and make the ZA speedrun a creative puzzle to best find the spots to equip and unequip it before each battle. And because of situations like this, Hawlucha is the Pokemon that I think will likely take over most of the battles within ZA alongside Totodile or Tepig. Because Hawlucha not only has an advantage over two of the starter Pokemon I think your rival's going to have, but it's also completely immune to ground moves from Pokemon like Zygarde, which I think is going to have a massive story involvement in the form of some crazy in-game Mega Evolution raid battle. And if it's not my boy Hawlucha, then I honestly don't mind being wrong, because sometimes being wrong is what sets off a journey to being right in the world of speedrunning, where the goal is to find the most amount of time saved from the shortest amount of time investment we can. And that is exactly why Pokemon like Nidoking, Tauros, Lillipup, and Zorua prevailed as well as they did, because they were all investments that did a better job of answering the question, what is the fastest way to beat a Pokemon game, better than the Pokemon that were used before them. And with that said, I look forward to solving that exact question for Pokemon Legends EA to know exactly how wrong I am. But until then, thanks for watching, and special thanks to my supporters on Patreon.